Welcome to the Learning Lounge podcast. I'm Dr. Joel Gardner. Today we'll be talking about homeschooling for college credit. And now a lot of people homeschool, and COVID has made this a reality for many others. But did you know that your child can receive college credit while homeschooling? So here with us today is Jennifer Cook-DeRosa. After 2 decades in higher education, Jennifer stepped away from college administration and teaching to homeschool her sons and create Homeschooling for College Credit, which is an organization that helps homeschooling families earn college credit in high school and build a homeschooling exit strategy. Now, Jennifer is the author of the well-received book, Homeschooling for College Credit, A Parent's Guide to Resourceful High School Planning. Now, she has also served as an executive in residence at Franklin University in the provost's office. And we'll talk more about what that's been like and what that relationship has been. But Jennifer, welcome to the show. It is wonderful to have you here.
Hi, Joel. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk we mentioned your background, work in higher education, doing your own homeschooling. Why don't you just give us kind of your experiences with these things and how they've shaped some of your thinking?
Well, I should preface all that by saying that I didn't start out with the idea of homeschooling. I didn't start out thinking I would be working in higher ed. My original background is as a chef. And so when I was working as a chef, our local community college decided to start an apprenticeship program, and they wanted industry people to come and help kind of develop that. So I jumped on that and ended up enjoying it so much that I got involved in running that program and working in the community college system. So I was with Eastern Iowa Community College District for almost 20 years. And throughout that time, I did get married. We started a family and I started homeschooling. And so my role changed quite a bit over the course of that time, from starting out as an administrator, but ending up as an adjunct faculty and working in the committees and things like that, staying active. But I never went into the education aspect of it kind of, with the idea that I wanted to work in education. So my mindset of going into that program was always a little different than some of my colleagues. And one of the things that was a problem in our program, and it's a problem in a lot of programs across the country, is that our completion rates were really poor. And coming at that problem as a chef, I, kind of naively assumed that our completion rates for our program should be 100%. I figured 100% of the students would start, 100% of the students should graduate. And so because that wasn't the reality, we were kind of, thinking about solutions and ways to get the students graduated. In our program, our students needed to complete some general education courses. And so that was always an issue. In the early 90s, we didn't have flexible learning options like we have now. So our students wouldn't have access to these special sections where they could, complete their courses one day a week, or there wasn't distance learning. None of these were options. And separately, I had read a book that mentioned CLEP exams, which is a non-traditional way to earn college credit. And you're essentially testing out of a class. And so I wasn't sure that was legitimate. And I went to our testing center and found out that we were a testing center and that our students could use those exams as a way of earning credit. And I thought of that as a way that our completion rates could go up. And so kind of as an experiment, I took a CLEP exam myself to see, how hard they were. And kind of pushing forward through that, I'll say that I ended up testing out of an associate's degree for that experiment. And so that was kind of how I learned about non-traditional college credit. And because we were homeschooling, it just kind of evolved into, an understanding that some of these non-traditional credit opportunities could work in my homeschool and probably in the homeschool that other parents had as well. So it was kind of an interesting accidental, marriage of these two subjects that landed me in this subject.
Well, so this is very interesting. So it's kind of this thought that, wait a second, how come my students aren't succeeding in this program, this higher education program for becoming chefs? And then investigating and finding this like almost secret path that people don't even recognize or know is there. You earned an associate's degree by just taking tests, which is just amazing. Amazing. So what are some of the other, so you mentioned the CLEP exams. That's one interesting pathway for earning college credits. What are some of the other types of things? So I know you did a lot more research later on after as you started homeschooling and started investigating. What are some of those other pathways that people can use to earn college credit?
Yeah, so PLEP is one of the types of credit by exam. Some of the audience might be familiar with advanced placement. That's another program that's been around a long time, also from the College Board, where students take a course and then after independently learning a subject, they can take an exam and test out, if you will, if the college awards credit for testing out. And so you can use credit by exam as one option. The families that I deal with are students that are in secondary education, so they have access to other programs as well, things like dual enrollment, and that can have many names depending on where you're listening from. Um, but it's essentially taking college courses as a high school or middle school student and killing two birds with one stone. So the reason that that works really well in the homeschool community is because the parents have to arrange for curriculum anyway. So a high school parent is looking for the textbook to use for biology or for United States history or whatever subjects that they're trying to teach that year. And so by using the colleges as a vehicle to deliver that curriculum, they can generally save a lot of money because very often there's reduced or free tuition available to students who haven't graduated high school. So, this is one way for parents to get access to lower cost, high quality education. And then once their student graduates from high school, they can use that towards degree completion. So it's kind of a blending of different opportunities, and it's not a one size fits all. So some families find that using courses like offered through Franklin or other community colleges or universities is a good path for them. Others find that they like to do the independent study and they use exams like CLEP or advanced placement or similar tests. So it just kind of, it's something to be aware of. And there's a lot of pros and cons to the different options.
Great. So it sounds like there are a lot of options. Maybe, like you said, state-based. There's some states have different programs, but they have similar patterns at least. And so there's a need, it sounds like, to sort of contextualize to the specific aptitudes or goals or desires of your children. So what advice do you have for homeschoolers, for parents who want their students to be really successful and be able to earn some of that college credit as they're moving forward?
Well, I think being aware that it exists is really the first big piece because I think uh, that having access to that information is sometimes challenging for the homeschool community. If your students in public or private school, they have access to teachers and guidance counselors and people who are, facilitating that information flow. And so a lot of times kids will find out about programs because they're told about them from their school. But homeschool parents don't have that same flow of information. So you have to be a little proactive and try to connect with other families that are homeschooling, particularly families that are using programs that generate college credit. Learn about those and find out if that's something that would work for your family. Our organization is a social organization, so you don't have to live anywhere. You can just simply log in and connect with other parents. So, having access to the information and being aware that it exists is really the first step. And then from there, my advice is to bring college credit into your homeschool as opposed to trying to morph your homeschool to meet some other requirements. And even just casually earning one college credit puts your student ahead, right? Most people don't earn college credit till they graduate high school. So anything that they do ahead of time is really going to be beneficial for either bringing that goalpost closer or reducing the cost um, that will eventually be part of that college experience.
Well, I love that advice too of just saying, just try it out. Just do one class, do one credit, and see how it goes. Then you can build or stack, and the next thing. That sounds really like a simple but powerful approach. You mentioned this cost savings idea. Um, Maybe just talk a little bit about that. What are you seeing with some of the people? You mentioned the social organization. There are all kinds of pages for, I think, overall for homeschooling for college credit, but for each state because it's so contextualized there. And so we can put the links into those into our podcast description for those different sites. But what are some of the results or the positive impacts you're seeing in people in the community on how much they're saving with like in college tuition, for example?
Yeah, I mean, so free is my favorite price. So let's start with free. If you are in a state that has a college credit program, and Ohio would be an example of one of these states that does, about half the states have programs that have free or reduced tuition for high school families. Now, the eligibility is going to vary. So it's hard to generalize and say, that you would automatically be able to participate in your program. But as a rule of thumb, students that are in about 11th or 12th grade are generally eligible to participate in either a community college or four-year university program. If you meet the requirements and the tuition is reduced, then that would be a considerable savings, off of a regular rack rate tuition price, which you are going to pay full price when you graduate high school. So look for inexpensive dual enrollment locally first. And if you don't have access to local tuition, you can choose to enroll in a university that does allow students from other states to participate. And I keep a long list, but I mean, my list only has about 100 schools on it. There's, I'm sure, thousands. And these are other ways that you can kind of branch out, especially if you have a certain school in mind that you want to look at. Check and see if they offer programs to high school students, because that would be, one opportunity to do that. The other thing is if you're looking at credit by exam, there is the College Board, which is the author of both CLEP and Advanced Placement. Um, they're also the authors of the PSAT or the SAT, so parents might be familiar with the College Board. If you go on to collegeboard.org's website, you can click on information about the CLEP exam, and they will be able to link you right to a free prep program, modernstates.org. It's a nonprofit organization. Your student can go through that program. And when I also am talking about this, I want to encourage anyone of any age to do this, because you don't have to be in high school to do this, but you can complete this free online prep course, and then they will give you a voucher to take your CLEP exam for no cost. And so that's also another way that anyone from any state in all over the world actually could earn college credit by exam. So, I mean, there's just a lot of different ways to do that, from free tuition, reduced tuition, credit by exam, and there's a lot of other ways as well.
That is amazing. Now, I know you have your book, Homeschooling for College Credit, and so I'm sure you're spelling out many more of these options within that book. It sounds like it's definitely worth.
Well, we have a list of 30 on
Great.
on homeschoolingforcollegecredit.com. But if I would, I would just say that if you're just starting out to explore kind of the nuances and the different options, you really want to stay with the types of college credit that are the most likely to transfer later. And in that case, if your student is taking English 101 from a regionally accredited college or university, there's a really good chance that that's going to transfer into what ultimately becomes where they attend college. So, having the dual enrollment, having college credit earned through regionally accredited colleges is really important, because that makes good use of your time and your money. There are certainly other ways that are a little more unique, a little more niche, but they don't always transfer as well. But once you kind of start investigating the different opportunities that are out there, you can decide for yourself what's a good fit.
Amazing. Excellent. Now, you've recently been serving as executive resident here at Franklin University in the provost's office. Maybe can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, it's wonderful. The provost of Franklin University reached out to me because I had written an article about Franklin University. There's some unique things about Franklin University that mesh really well with the homeschooling community who's earning lots of college credit. And one of those is that you can bring in a lot of dual enrollment and credit by exam and these types of college credit that we were talking about today. So parents who are resourceful and are planning, and they kind of begin this process early, they can be very deliberate with their teens' curriculum choices and also the types of college credit that they earn. Franklin is an opportunity for students to transfer in that credit towards a degree. And for students who live in Ohio, there is also a dual enrollment program available, College Credit Plus, and that is a program that allows free tuition. So students can do that at Franklin University as well. So there's a lot of reasons that I was excited to talk about Franklin. And so I was invited to do the executive in residence and just kind of help bring awareness to how the homeschooling community could be served by Franklin. So it's been a great experience this year.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Franklin. I know we do have a lot of Franklin University has many. Part of our mission is to offer education, high quality education, to the broadest possible users, or not users, students
Mhm.
and learners. And so, what? So this is just one way we do that. But what should parents and their children who have earned a lot of college credit, what should they be looking for in a university or in a college?
Well, I think, again, now keeping in mind, I'm coming at this from a little bit of a different perspective. I wasn't, in higher education first. I was in industry first. And so I believe that you should start with the end in mind. And instead of focusing so hard on getting your kids into college, college admissions is really where all of the marketing dollars go. All of the targets are on enrollment. If parents could kind of step back from some of that hype and instead think about how they're going to get their kids out of college, they can go in with a little bit better strategy. So if you look at ways to bring in college credit that you've already earned in high school or ahead of time, and that can be even for an adult. That's what I did. You don't have to be in high school, but if you think about ways to bring that goalpost closer and focus on how you're going to get out, that is the most important thing. It's not important that you start; it's important that you finish.
Excellent. This seems like a begin with the end in mind sort of an approach, which
Yeah.
is wisdom. Very good. Well, any closing thoughts that our listeners or other homeschooling parents or parents in general who have children in high school, what should they be thinking about? Any advice or closing thoughts?
Well, I mean, specifically for a homeschooling parent, you really have to develop an exit strategy because you will come to an end. Homeschooling will come to an end one way or the other. And so your next step doesn't have to be college. It can be any number of paths, but begin thinking about that with your teen and the types of courses and the types of college credit and those types of decisions. Um, are all going to be dependent on what that next step is going to look like for your family. So if it's using the community college, you can check and find out if they can get started on that now in high school. If it's using a 4-year university, finding out what those admissions requirements are. And also if your teen can earn college credit ahead of time, if they can bring that in and count that towards their degree and save some time or some money on that. And just always thinking about how to get through the program and also that the credential is the right credential that you need for the occupation you're trying to get. So
Mm,
it's just a lot of those pieces that the parent ends up being the guidance counselor. And so kind of thinking through and really leaning into that role instead of stepping back and hoping that the college will do that for you. The college won't do that for you. They will just help you with enrollment and help you with, taking those courses and so on. But you really should be more proactive in terms of what's your strategy for getting out of high school, getting into that next phase or next, chapter of your teens occupation and then getting them through that.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really great discussion. Some wonderful insights. Again, we'll put some of the links to the sites that you've been talking about, homeschoolingforcredit.com for collegecredit.com. Sorry. So much. Had so much fun talking to you, Jennifer, and really appreciate you being here on the Learning Lounge podcast. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me.